we're looking at different aspects of Hanukkah. I just want to report, in case the message hasn't reached you, that there is a new Beit Chabad. The Dovid Chassidim have a new geographical position in the world, in Gaza. They erected a giant menorah, more than twice the height of a human being, on the top of a building 40 meters above the street, and lit the menorah in Gaza. I hope the symbolism was not lost, not at home, and not on Jews around the world, and not on the non-Jews around the world, and not the least on Hamas. Let's see them knock it down. Not going to happen. There is a law, but that's very relevant to the Nes of Hanukkah. The Nes of Hanukkah provided pure oil that was not tummy, not defiled, in particular not defiled by death, since it was in the middle of a war, to be able to use for a menorah. The law is that you don't need pure oil for the menorah. If the only oil you have is tummy oil, you light it with tummy oil. It's a general rule about the service in the temple, that if the only implements that you have are implements that are tummy, you use them. It's better, of course, if they're tahor, but it's not necessary. So that means the whole miracle was to enable us to do the mitzvah in the best possible way, not to do the mitzvah, because we could have done the mitzvah without the miracle. I have to think about that. Why was the miracle something which just made it better? And this aspect of the miracle is actually reflected in the laws of Hanukkah, because the ultimate minimum requirement for the lights of Hanukkah is 1 candle per house per night. That means for the whole family, a sum total of 8 candles for the whole holiday. Then there are ways of enhancing the mitzvah. And there are 2 different ways, in which order they come. One is that instead of lighting 1 candle per night, you add another candle per night so that the number counts off the number of the days. The other is that each person in the house should have his own Hanukkah and light candles, so that, again, this is different between Ashkenazim and Sfardim. If you do one of those enhancements, that makes your mitzvah mahadrin. Mahadrin means a person who does the mitzvah in the most glorified way. But if you use both enhancements, that means to say each person has his own candles, and each person adds a new candle each night. That's called mahadrin min mahadrin. The ones who are the glorified beyond the normal glorification, super glorification. Mitzvah's Hanukkah is the only mitzvah in the whole Torah that has 2 levels. Many mitzvahs have a level of hidur, mahadrin. There are certain things that in the mitzvah are lechatchila, it means that you should do them, but if you omit them, they don't destroy the mitzvah. But there's no other mitzvah that has, first of all, the basic level, and then a level of doing it in a glorified way, and then another level of doing it in a super glorified way. One message of that structure is that we're talking here about glorifying the mitzvah. Since the whole miracle was only to glorify the mitzvah, we're reflecting that in the way in which the law expresses the idea of glorification. And this is a typical type of relationship. Often, maybe it wouldn't be appropriate to say always, the laws themselves and the structure of the laws express metaphysical ideas, what you might call mystical ideas, so that when you do the mitzvah, if you don't know that higher level from which the mitzvah draws its significance, you're missing out to a great extent in understanding the nature of the mitzvah. I'll give you a couple of examples to show you how dramatic this can be. Let's suppose that a person is in mourning for a relative. Well, one thing that such a person does is lead the prayers. Now, let's imagine a synagogue that has lots of people who are mourners, and they have to divide up the week's prayers, which ones to lead. And Reuven is top of the list for whatever reason. He gets first choice. Now, there are 18 prayers to lead because on Shabbos this isn't done, and 3 prayers a day. So he gets to make the first choice as to which one he wants to take. Of all 18, 6 morning, 6 afternoon, and 6 evening, could you guess which would be the best one for him to take? So if you don't know the answer, you would never guess it. You might think, well, how about Monday and Thursday in the morning? Then you have reading the Torah, which is extra blessings, and he could be called to the Torah and he could make those extra blessings. Nope, that's not the right answer. Nor any of the day prayers is the right answer. It happens to be an evening prayer, which has the least participation. Mincha, at least you say the whole Shemona Esrei, there's repetition of the whole Shemona Esrei, there's Kedusha. In the evening you don't have that. And the one that's best to do is Saturday night. Saturday night's Mariv is the one he should pick. Why is that? And the answer is because the souls of those people who have departed are being judged. And the judgment takes place only on weekdays, not on Shabbos. That means on Motzei Shabbos, Saturday night, those souls are passing back from a non-judgment mode into a judgment mode. And at that moment, when they are re-entering the judgment mode, that's when your mitzvah in their name can have the maximum benefit for them. I remember in 1991 when I was in Oval for 18 months. My parents died 6 months apart. I was reading the Pnei Baruch, which is an encyclopedia of laws of Avelos, and I read that and I thought, wow, I'm still connected. They're not here with me in this world, but I can do something for that neshama, for that soul. And that's why you pick this one, because of what it does for that soul. And the second best is Mariv the rest of the week, because the judgment goes from daytime going into nighttime. There's an intensification of the severity of the judgment. So that's the second best. So then you think, wow, so that's the reason why I choose the prayers that I do, because I'm still connected with them. That's one example. Ramchal Derech Hashem asks a similar question: why is the morning prayer Shacharis the longest by far of all 3? And the evening prayer is second in length, and Mincha is by far the shortest. Why is it that way? Now you could think of all sorts of practical reasons, but although they might be correct, they're not ultimate. So he explains as follows: every day has a new theme, and he proves this from a piece of our liturgy that we say twice every morning, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mechadesh Tomid B'chol Yom Ma'aseh Bereishis. God renews the work of creation continuously every day. So the thoughtful reader says, now wait a second. If it's continuous, it's instant by instant. What do you add by saying every day? Of course, it's instant by instant. So Tuesday's instants aren't the same instance as Monday's instants. So of course it's renewed on Tuesday. And says the Ramchal that what's going on instant by instant is the bare existence of things. But in addition to the existence of things, there's the theme that the day is dedicated to, the spiritual reality that it's supposed to implement. The Arizal had a system of mystical intentions with which he prayed, and those who became close to him and saw the structure noticed that every day was different. So they said to him, every day is different? There's no repetitions? Now, I don't have the verbal answer he gave, but the gist of it was, yesterday was N days from the creation, and today is N plus 1 days from the creation. It's a different day. How could it have the same intentions? It's not the same place in history. So each day has its theme. Now, says the Ramchal, this theme applies according to the sacrificial day. I have a motto, which you might put in your pocket. If you ask a question about Torah and get a simple answer, it's wrong. Nothing simple. When does the day begin? It depends. There are two different kinds of days. For most purposes, the day begins, as you know, in the evening. But there are certain purposes for which the day begins in the morning, and the sacrifices are one of them. There are many sacrifices which you bring in the morning, and you can eat them until the next morning. But then it's over. The day of that sacrifice is morning to morning, not night to night. Kadosh Baruch Hu projects these meanings, these spiritual principles into the day. Each day in the morning, a new principle. Now, one function of the prayer is to address those principles, grasp those principles, apply those principles, whether you're conscious of it or not. That's one of the things that's going on. Well, in the morning, it's a new principle. That's why it requires the maximum length of prayer. Moving from daylight to darkness is a significant variation on the theme. That's why the second longest prayer is the evening prayer. Afternoon is the continuation of the day's theme into the prelude of night, which is the least significant transition, and therefore it's the shortest prayer. So the question of the length of the prayers depends upon what's going on up there, and that's true of the whole of Yiddishkeit. The whole of it is a reflection of a spiritual structure that underlies the nature of the world, and that being the case, to really understand what you're doing, you have to be able to trace it back to that spiritual structure. That is one of the main themes of the Kabbalah. So what we just saw is that the structure of the laws of Hanukkah, which have the Mahadran and Mahadran Mahadran layers, one on top of the other, reflects the fact that the miracle was done in a way to make us able to do the mitzvah of lighting the menorah in the best possible way, not the minimally acceptable way. That means that the whole spirit is one of doing things in the best possible way. Now let's see how that spreads out. Who initiated the war? A family of priests. Why they? Why were they the ones to initiate the war? Now, if you were looking for volunteers to start a guerrilla action, I don't think you would specifically look among the priests for that purpose. But the trigger was the abominations that the Greeks performed in the temple. The Greeks had influence and some control over the Jewish population for 50 years. It was a long time. This triggered the revolt. Well, so something that happens in the temple, an abomination, is something that the priests are going to feel more than normal people. And that spurred them to the action. And legally, there's no requirement to risk your life to prevent abominations in the temple. Yes, if it's a time of religious persecution, there are conditions under which you would have to give your life rather than transgress any mitzvah whatsoever, not just the three main mitzvahs for which you usually have to die rather than transgress, but any mitzvah whatsoever. If the enemy comes to you and points a gun and says, "Don't, put on purple tefillin," or wear tzitzis with 9 strings instead of 4 strings, then you would have to say, "No, I don't do that," and die. But you don't have to walk outside and publicly identify and attack the nearest enemy on the grounds of what he's doing. That you don't have to do. The Maccabees, say this group of priests, said, "We are going to fight to take this down." And they gathered together with them a group of fighters who were, in the end, were successful. So their whole spirit was, this isn't absolutely necessary, but we're going to do it anyway. That's the spirit animating them. The miracle reflects that spirit by enabling us to do the mitzvah in the best possible way. And if you had any doubts about the connection, reflect that it's the Kohanim, the priests, who initiate the battles on the basis of the abomination in the temple, and the one cruse of pure oil was found with the signature of the Kohen Gadol on it. Why is that? Was the Kohen Gadol in the oil business? That he had signatures? You have to pay him special tariff for it? It was found buried in the ground. It certainly didn't contract any tumor. It doesn't need the signature of the Kohen Gadol to know that it's pure. But it's the Kohanim started, and this thing is certified by a Kohen, by the high priest. Again, it's the same connection. So the spirit is carried out throughout the nature of the oil and the nature of its laws to the initiation of the war. Now, why should it be that way? Because, as the Maharal says, let me not say the whole purpose. A key purpose in the miracle of the oil is to reflect on the war. If you were joining the battles and you were going through, and the Maharal says there were no open miracles. There were no open miracles in the warfare. The warfare looked like normal warfare. And you know what you're doing is right. The leaders have told you that it's something we need to do, and you see success after success. But it's military strategy and bravery and circumstances. You come to the temple, and the first performance in the temple, lighting the menorah, there is a visible, obvious miracle, and that miracle expresses the character of what you're doing. You would obviously see that as a divine response to what you're doing. And that's to say that when you look at the war and you see the war in naturalistic terms, you're making a tragic mistake, because underlying the war is divine providence, which is being applied in a way that isn't visible. And the overlying lesson is that whatever you think of as natural is divine providence. It's just what divine providence is almost always hidden. So that the implication of the miracle of the oil in the temple was to force a person to confront the fact that, let's put it this way, the division in the world between the natural and the miraculous is not a false division, but it's a superficial division. The difference between the natural and miraculous is not the difference of how something happens, what the causality is. It isn't that the natural is where God is on vacation, and the laws of nature operate blindly on their own, and then when necessary, God intervenes. No, what we call the laws of nature is, in the words of the Chazon Ish, the regular, repetitive, categorical operation of divine providence. And what we call a miracle is the action of divine providence to produce an event which doesn't fit the normal categories, doesn't fit the normal patterns, but the causation is the same throughout. So that's an example of how the laws express this underlying idea. Now, there's another problem. This also deals with the laws of Hanukkah. The sources tell us that the day on which the Maccabees took control of the city of Jerusalem, which wasn't the end of the war went on for months afterwards. They were chasing the Assyrian Greeks and the Jews who had become Hellenized northward. The day in which they entered the city of Jerusalem was the 25th of Kislev. In fact, they break up the word Hanukkah into two words, Chanu, which means to come to a resting place, Kafeh, 25. So it was the 25th of Hanukkah, of Kislev. Okay, and they came into the temple and cleaned it out, and they set up a menorah, a makeshift menorah. The menorah does not have to be made out of gold. And then they lit the menorah. When did they light the menorah? What time of day is it when you light the menorah? It's nightfall. Oh, it's nightfall. What date is that nightfall? The nightfall after the day of the 25th of Kislev is the nightfall, the date of the 26th of Kislev. The first night on which they lit the menorah was the 26th of Kislev. Gee, we don't do it that way. We light it on the night of the 25th, 24 hours earlier. Why do we do that? That's a good question. When you go around and go to people and so forth, ask them why it is. that if they lit it at night on the 26th, we light it on the 25th. That's one question. Now leave that question on the side for a moment, put it in your short-term memory, and let's ask another question. The Beis Yosef, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, asked a famous question to which I'm told there are 300 answers. They found a cruse of oil with enough oil for one night. And the oil provided for 8 nights. So how many nights of miracle oil do you have? Isn't it 7? You had one already. You just needed 7 more. So you have 7 nights of miracle. No, if you have 7 nights of miracle, and when we light the menorah, we're celebrating the miracle of the oil, why don't we light 7? Why do we light 8? That question has attracted many, many answers. In fact, I think there was a sefer with like 300 answers. The Maharal, for example, answers the question by saying, think of how the miracle took place. Now, we don't have any records as to how it took place, and there are many different ways it could have taken place. But let's say it took place by the oil miraculously burning more slowly. So that they filled up the cups the first night, and that emptied the oil they had, and they ignited the lights. And in the morning, when they put the lights out, they noticed that the cups were still 7/8 full. And that's what happened night after night. 1/8 of the original oil burned each night. So that means the whole character of the oil has changed to be much slower in combustion, but to provide the same amount of energy. So there was a miracle every night. That would be one answer to the Beis Yosef's question. Of course, we have no proof that that's how it happened. Another explanation that has been given is, here's how it could happen. You have the original container of oil, and you're pouring it into the cups of the menorah. As you pour, and of course, the container has enough for, if you empty the container, you'll fill all 8. When you go through and pour it in all 8, you look at the container is still full. Well, how many times does that have to happen? It has to happen on the first night, second night, 8th, 3rd night, 4th night, 5th night, 6th night, 7th night. But it happens on the 7th night, the 8th night, it doesn't have to stay full. You can pour it, it'll be empty, because that's all the oil you need. So this idea of the oil, of the container staying full would happen on only 7 nights, not on 8 nights. And so you'll be back with the Beis Yosef's question, why are we celebrating 8 nights for a miracle that was only 7 nights? And in addition, you could ask about the Maharal's answer. I'm not saying that this would, so to speak, remove his answer, but it's something left that's unanswered. Yes, every night something happened that was miraculous because the oil burned more slowly on every night. But the burning more slowly on every night had the effect of taking 1 night's oil and making it into 8 nights' oil, which is a net effect of 7 nights, because you had 1 night's oil to start with. So the net effect of the miracle is to add 7 more. So again, you could ask why it is that you're lighting 8 instead of 7. Okay, now let's see if we can put 2 and 2 together and get 4. I'm telling you what's a prima Gottleib now. So we had 2 questions. Number 1, why is it that we start on the 25th when they started on the 26th? And number 2, why do we light 8 instead of just 7? And here's the answer that's suggested. On the first night, we're not lighting for the miracle of the oil. On the first night, we're lighting for the military victory. And then the next 7 nights are to commemorate the 7 nights of oil miracle that the Beis Yosef tells us that we had. Which means that the first night has an entirely different character from the other nights of Hanukkah. And this could be part of the explanation of what the Maharal also points out. I can tell you personally, when I read this Maharal, I thought to myself, have I been asleep my whole life? I never even noticed it. When you look at Al Nisim, the special prayer that we put into the prayers and into the benching after meals, the whole of Al Nisim doesn't mention the miracle of the oil at all. And even Haneres Halolu, what you say just before you ignite the lights on the menorah, just before you light them, you say these lights are holy, and we should only look at them, we shouldn't use them for anything. That's the introduction to lighting the menorah. Doesn't mention anything about the miracle of the oil. Talks about milchamos, wars, it doesn't talk about that. And salvations, yeshuos, but doesn't talk about the oil. How could that be that the celebration of Hanukkah in the liturgy doesn't mention the miracle of the oil? So the Maharal says because the function of the miracle of the oil, a major function, is to direct your attention to the war and appreciate that the war itself is divine providence, which you might not have understood, you might not have realized. On the first night, the way we're explaining it now, that's all it is. You're lighting it just for the war, because on the first night, the 25th of Kislev, there wasn't any miracle of the oil. No oil was kindled in the temple on that night. So this gives you another perspective on what's going on when we light the menorah. Now, there is a halacha in the menorah. What I'm telling you now, I haven't seen written explicitly, but I have discussed it with Talmidei Chachamim, and they tend to agree with me that this is how it has to be understood. The law, as we have it, is to light the menorah in such a way that it is visible to the public. That's why the time of it is from the beginning of night until people stop coming home from their work, coming home in the street, and people should be able to see it. That's why many light it outside or light it in a window, which is visible from the street. But the halacha is, I'll tell you two things now. The halacha is that if there's danger, then you can light it inside where it's not visible outside. Now, we should think about that. If there's danger, then you can light it inside. Why is that? Of course, if there's danger, you don't have to risk your life for this mitzvah. So, if there's danger, lighting it outside, don't light it. But if the mitzvah is to light it where it's visible to the public, then lighting it inside is just not doing the mitzvah. You can't change the mitzvah to something else, break the rules of the mitzvah because you're in danger. That's absurd. That's not doing the mitzvah at all. It's sort of like saying that if there were, as there might be someday, a law against using leather garments of any kind, and golly, tefillin have leather straps and leather boxes. Peter Singer wouldn't like that. To say, okay, I'll use plastic. But that's not tefillin. In fact, it's dangerous. Doesn't mean you can use plastic. It means you don't do the mitzvah because you haven't got you're not required to risk your life in order to do this mitzvah. This means that in the original formulation of the mitzvah, there had to be a provision that it could be done inside also. So that all that danger does is trigger that provision which was made originally. Because if it wasn't made originally, then you wouldn't have been able to light it inside. Now the Ramah says in the Shulchan Aruch, we light inside. He doesn't say we light inside when it's dangerous. He doesn't say because it's dangerous we light inside. He just writes, we light inside. If in the original mitzvah there were two forms, the outside form and the inside form, and then when the Gemara says, there's danger, you can light it inside, it means the Gemara was accessing an aspect of the mitzvah under the conditions of danger. But it indicates that the original condition of doing it inside wasn't only for the sake of danger, wasn't made up because of danger. There were two ways to do it. There are more paskins, we light inside. That, by the way, changes the restriction in time. If you're lighting inside, then you don't have the light at the time when people outside are going home from work. They're not going to see it. Maybe you have heard of Hasidic rabbis who will light at 8 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night, and you think, how can they do that? And then your deeply seated prejudices come to the fore. Well, they're only Hasidim, they don't care. But it's not true. They're following the Ramah, who says we light inside, and once you light inside, you don't have to worry about the danger. So then, doing it in such a way that the people outside can see it is definitely an improvement. It's definitely a better way to do it. Just like wearing tzitzis. Wearing tzitzis outside and so that people can see them is definitely an improvement, but it's not necessary. And that's built into the idea of tzitzis itself. It says, Urisemoso, you should see them. It says you should see them and remember, and the next verse says you should remember again. And one implication of that is even blind people have to put on tzitzis. They're not going to see it, they have to put it on anyway. So the idea of doing it inside is a genuine form of doing the mitzvah, and I haven't had information yet from the world as to what they're doing about Hanukkah, but my guess is that in many places of the world this year they are making use of the idea of lighting inside because of the danger. I saw actually a headline about a fellow, I don't know, in America someplace, where he asked the non-Jews on his street to please light menorahs in solidarity with him and the other Jews on the street, so that when a non-Jew comes and is looking for trouble, if he sees that the whole street has menorahs, he might think twice before he does something. I don't remember whether they said yes or no, but I thought to myself, that's where we've come to the point where people are afraid to express themselves Jewishly because of that danger. So the menorah carries these two aspects, and the history of the menorah is the history of learning that military battles are a matter of divine providence. Now, that means that part of what we're supposed to learn from Hanukkah is to see battles as divine providence. So that depends upon your perception, perhaps, and who's teaching you and what information you have. But at the very least, it should teach us what to hope for and what to pray for. We are all praying for the safety of the soldiers. We are all praying that the enemies should be destroyed. We're all praying for the security that should be forthcoming from this effort. We should be, in addition, and I would say primarily, praying for that the process should lead to a sanctification of God's name. That's the ultimate purpose of all these processes, to bring HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name into the world. Some people are getting the message. You know, they say there are no atheists in a foxhole. That's to a very great extent true, and we have stories coming out of this conflict now. One fellow said, if I survive, I'm going to keep Shabbos. And he did survive. So he's starting to keep Shabbos. Another fellow who was very far on the left, a number of people have done this now, very far on the left, and he saw October 7th, and he said, I realized I was terribly wrong. I made a terrible mistake. Who I am, who they are, what the right values are, what to expect, how to behave. And he said, I never identify myself as a Jew. I'm Israeli, I'm a citizen of the world, and being Jewish was never part of his identity. So he said, no, I made a mistake. I should express myself, my identity as a Jew. I'm going to do something for Shabbos. Something. Light candles. I know that Jews like candles for Shabbos. I'm going to light candles for Shabbos. So Friday afternoon, he calls his family together. They get the candles ready, and he says, I think there's some prayer you're supposed to say when you light the candles, but I don't know what it is. And one of the kids says, Ein baya, Abba, it's no problem. Abba, I know the right prayer. Because That's the one you light. I can't. That's prayer you make on candles. It's not Hanukkah, it's Shabbos. Yeah, but that's the one you make. And these are Israelis. These are Israelis. So I guess that's the prayer that they made until somebody got to him after this article was published and explained to him what the right prayer was. He's talking about people who are very, very far away. And they're coming now to appreciate that something's going on that they couldn't realize. There was another a woman who was a famous broadcaster here in Israel, and on the left, and she had a change of mind, and she actually recorded herself explaining why she had this change of mind. She said, "I have a close friend who's one of the settlers, and his friend was telling her that the idea that women are women and families are families and all the politics is really superficial and they don't really mean it, and if we just give them more jobs and give them more rights and treat them with dignity and respect, then we'll be able to make peace with them, etc., etc." Let's stay in the leftist line. So, and the settler woman said to her, the thing that would make a Gaza mother proudest is if her child would die as a martyr. And this broadcaster said, "Don't talk to me like that. It's not true. I won't hear it. It's not right. It's not the way people are. Don't talk to me like that." That's how committed she was. After October 7th, she changed her mind. And she went public and said, "I changed my mind. I made a mistake. I didn't realize the gap between the ideals that I held as a progressive and liberal and the reality on the ground. It's a gigantic, gigantic gap. It's simply not true that they share the same values and share the same commitments and share the same sensitivities." She went to visit a group of Haredi women who were manufacturing supplies for the army. And she hugged them and kissed them. She said, "I had no idea." She had no idea. So some people are waking up. My youngest son provides for the army. He's been doing it for 20 years. In particular, in wartime, he provides tzitzis for them. He's not the only one doing it. There are others doing it. Tens of thousands of pairs of tzitzis have been given out because you're facing the enemy and it's life and death. So, that being the case, and this is a mitzvah, and the mitzvah is very visible. People know about it, and the soldiers want to identify. This is not, people read this psychologically as a kind of hypocrisy. When you're in danger, you do, when not. I think that's superficial. It's not correct. And I'll give you an illustration from Jewish sources, which is in a similar vein. You probably heard this phrase, conscious money. Conscious money means, well, I do what I do, but I give money to charity, so it's okay because I give money to charity. I steal, I have a protection racket like certain ethnic groups, or I cheat in my taxes, but if I give 10% to charity, then it's okay. And we think of that as corrupt, utterly corrupt and dishonest. Imagine someone who gives money to a famous rabbi, the money that he steals, the money that he cheats about, but he gives money to the rabbi, and that makes him feel okay. Is that totally worthless? Is that totally corrupt? Well, we have a verse, and the verse says that the wicked hates the righteous and wants him dead. The wicked person hates the righteous, wants to have him dead. This guy who's giving money to the rabbi isn't like that, is he? He doesn't hate the righteous person. He doesn't want him dead. He's willing to give him money. Then he's not totally lost. He's not totally lost. Part of him still respects it. Part of him thinks that it's still valuable. That being the case, he doesn't qualify as totally gone. And that means when he asks for tzitzis because he's carrying a gun in Gaza, the part of him that's still connected is talking. It's not just corrupt dishonesty. The part of him that's still connected is still talking. And it's worthwhile to recognize that and to reinforce that and to embrace that because it is genuine. And as we usually tell people who go through difficult circumstances, and feel themselves rejected by Kodesh Baruch Hu, we say to them, are you still breathing? Then the Kodesh Baruch Hu is investing in you. He believes in you. If he didn't, you wouldn't be alive. So don't give up on yourself. Now we say this with respect to the others. If the Kodesh Baruch Hu is still giving them life, he still believes in them. He still has something for them to do. He has something for them to accomplish. So we shouldn't give up on them either. So our attitude has to be that we recognize and we reinforce, we appreciate these things that they do, to supply them for them, and to express our gratitude to them for putting themselves in danger to help protect all of us. Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, who lived through the 73 war, said, I don't have the exact quote, but this was the gist. He said that there's a very difficult balance that you have to maintain, that the outcome of the war is being determined in the Beis Medrash, where we're learning Torah. That's where it's being determined. And yet, to have genuine gratitude to the soldiers who are fighting on the ground. If you emphasize the Beis Medrash, then you think the soldiers are just pawns. They're not doing anything. If you think that the soldiers are saving you, then you discount the Beis Medrash. Both are tragically deep mistakes. Kodesh Baruch Hu, there are mitzvahs, a war of mitzvah, which requires participation. The halacha requires participation. So someone who's actually participating can't be discarded as doing something that's not necessary. On the other hand, you can't discount the fact that the spirit behind it and the divine providence that's managing the affairs is coming from the fact that we deserve it because of the way that we practice ourselves and identify ourselves as Jews, the Torah and mitzvos, and that being the case, we have to take our part of the responsibility very seriously. I don't remember whether it was he or someone else during the 73 war who spent all 24 hours a day in the Beis Medrash. He said, the soldiers can't go home. Soldiers can't go home. So I'm not going home. My commitment to the effort shouldn't be less than theirs. Okay, let's leave it there for today.